Welcome to the Positive Growth Doctor podcast for women. I'm your host, Dr. Christina Wilson. I created the Positive Growth Doctor after years of dealing with societal expectations, self-doubt, and perfectionism. I leveraged my 30 years of experience as a positive psychologist to address limiting beliefs and gain clarity to build confidence and navigate obstacles to achieve a healthier well-being. I knew that pain all too well. So I empower women to achieve confidence and live a positive-centered life. Subscribe to the podcast and check out the earlier episodes so you don't miss a thing. And let's get to it. Welcome to the Positive Growth Doctor podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Christina Wilson. I have a question for you. Okay, are you ready? If you could go back to high school, would you? It's not a trick question. For some, it was the glory days, and they would go back in a heartbeat. But for others, not so much. It was pretty traumatic for them. For me personally, I would rather poke my eye out repeatedly with my pen. So why does all this matter? Well, we've all experienced mean girls, right? These are girls that often grow up to be even better at it, sneakier and better manipulators. So we have to deal with them in adulthood too, unfortunately. However, I have seen some that will grow up and just become better human beings. They leave that old life behind. And that happens. But most often that's not the case, unfortunately. Our earlier experiences shape who we are and how we see the world. And experiences matter. But how much do they matter? Now, in this episode, I acknowledge that experiences matter and why. I remind you of those experiences, that the fact that they don't define you. And I offer some strategies to help you move forward and persevere. Because no one comes out of adolescence unscathed. They just don't. And you have to deal with this effectively into adulthood. Womanhood. So find the full transcript for this episode on your favorite podcast app and share the podcast with other women. Let's do this together. Help them grow on their journey in life. And you can also do that by adding a review on Apple Podcasts. That means so much to me, and I appreciate you. So uncovering the mystery of who we are as women and why. And this is several podcast episodes, right? So when I started my dissertation work many years ago, I wanted to know why adolescent females were so mean to each other. Why would someone treat another human being that way, right? Unfortunately, the topic of adolescent aggression would be really difficult to get past the IRB board, which assures the protection of participants. We don't want to re-traumatize people, right? And so it would take a decade to tiptoe around that. Just a hot mess. And complete that research study. Plus, why would I put myself through it and trigger my own trauma at the time? I've worked really hard to heal myself of all of that. And research suggests that personality development is derived from a combination of nature and nurture. And this means that we're born with some traits, some personality traits, but your experiences along the way also shape who you are. Perhaps that is why two people who have been subjected to the same thing, the same situation, sometimes deal with it differently. Yeah, that makes complete sense. And many things go into our development, such as parenting styles, socioeconomic factors, cultural influences, religion, um, the people we surround ourselves by, like our family and our friends, our coaches, neighbors, teachers, all of those things. Now, I grew up during a time when divorce was rare. I know it's not that way now. It's so different. Um, my parents divorced when I was 4 and again when I was 5. So I was already an outlier. By the way, that's a whole other um podcast episode as well. I grew up with a single mom, which meant we lived at the poverty level. It was hard. And I was an unusual child to begin with because I processed information differently, which made me seem either uninterested, backward, or lazy. And I always knew I was different because, but I just wasn't sure why, you know. I later learned that I'm actually neurodivergent and I learn differently and I'm quite intelligent, but approach the world in a very, very different way. Perhaps that is you, uh, you know, and perhaps it's not. I don't know, but um, maybe that's why I'd rather poke my eye out repeatedly with a pen than go back to high school, right? So, what was it like for you growing up? Think about that. What factors were at play that contributed to your development and experiences? What contributes to a woman feeling frustrated and stuck? It's just not unusual to feel like you're not enough or to lack confidence as a young girl. And many times that stays with you as a young woman. It actually just does for most people. No one has ever come into this world just with instant, ready made confidence. That doesn't happen, it doesn't exist. And that is why the earlier years are so painful. We're still trying to find ourselves and our place in the world where we belong. And I've been around for 50 years. And I recall being um, around some people that I hadn't seen in a very, very, very long time. And I was in a group of maybe 3 or 4 women. I think it was about 4. And we're just having this conversation. And one of these women literally did not engage with me at all, whatsoever, in the conversation, and even went so far as to refuse to acknowledge me and make eye contact. She literally pretended I wasn't even there. And I thought to myself, wow, things don't change. Don't always change. Sometimes they do, but some things don't change. So, what did I do wrong? Not one thing. Not one thing. The problem wasn't with me whatsoever. Unfortunately, women start questioning themselves during these all too common experiences. And when women behave this way, the issue lies within them. There's something underlying that they're dealing with, or maybe haven't dealt with. So much so that they feel like it's okay to treat others this way. And it took me well into my 20s and 30s before I even realized this. Of course, it was many years later that, this actual event occurred, but you start to kind of see this in your 20s and 30s. You know, And there are strategies for women to manage the impact of negative people and bullies. And I want to share those with you. So the first one is to recognize that it has little or nothing to do with you. And there is something going on within them. And I think it's important to stop for a minute and acknowledge that most often these women are hurting too. Okay? Um, because I want to foster a community of women that support one another and lift each other up and recognize that we're all hurting on some level or have hurt sometime. That is important. So number 2 would be just choose to let it go. Okay? What is the popular saying? Don't let them rent a space in your head. Yeah, choose to let it go. That doesn't mean that you forget the experience completely. You're just mindful that you might not have the relationship with that person, right? That you would like to. And just move forward, okay? Because that frees you of that. And you don't sit there and think about it constantly and get stuck in it. Be okay with moving forward. Be okay with not having, sitting around and braiding each other's hair, right? This is probably not going to happen, and that's okay. So you just move forward. Find people that you do want you in their lives. Number 3, understand that you are only responsible for your behavior. Okay? You're not responsible for them and for theirs. And number 4, set kind yet firm boundaries with them. You don't have to jump down their throat. I don't think that helps anybody. But, being firm with what you're okay with and what you're not is that, it's good to set those boundaries. Now, I have created a Facebook group called the Women's Empowerment Group on Facebook. And women come together to learn, increase their well-being, and support each other along the way. It's a beautiful thing. So join this next level community of women today. Do not wait. Join today. Okay? I hope this has helped. And let's meet up again next week for another episode. Have a blessed week. Thanks for listening to the Positive Growth Doctor podcast. Be sure to leave a review and tell other women about the podcast. Let's support one another. Find the full transcript of this episode on your favorite podcast app. Watch the podcast on the Positive Growth Doctor YouTube channel and learn more at thepositivegrowthdoctor.com. And be assured, you are not alone on your journey